while we continue looking at the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on various facets, I think one of the most crucial ones has been the impact on employment. Jobs have been lost, incomes have been impacted all over, but are things looking up for the better? Now, employment and gauging it is a tricky affair because there is no one consolidated data source. You have individual agencies which put out their own data based on their specific sample size, and that often gives us a gauge of where things are going. So I'm very excited to speak to my next guest. I'm speaking today with Suraj Morje, who's the Executive Director and Group CEO of Quest Corp, one of India's largest private employers, who is bringing with him a wealth of data to give us a great perspective. Suraj, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Tamanna. It's good to be here.
All right, let's get straight into it. Are we doing better from the month of October onwards? Can you compare so far what is happening in terms of formal employment?
Sure. Look, I mean, we certainly think that, and we're observing that the Indian labor market in the formal space seems to be at an inflection point. And there's a few things I think that are driving it, and I'm happy to give you some more facts to back it up. I think one, I saw your segment just now was about COVID and how we continue to manage COVID. And I think you're right. COVID is not over yet, far from it. At the same time, I think there is our society is learning to navigate the broad chasm between absolute paralysis and responsibly getting on with it. And I think given that we're beginning to understand how you catch COVID, what precautions to take, treatments are getting better, there's a vaccine on the horizon, we're starting to see a normalization of demand to pre-COVID levels. And you can look at GST collections, e-way bills, petroleum, multiple high-frequency indicators are showing that we're starting to learn to live with COVID and live despite it. I personally have been in the office 3 to 4 days a week for the last few weeks because I feel if our people are in the field, I should also be at work. And thankfully, we've managed disease and contagion reasonably well so far. So I think that's the first. We're learning to work with it. In our own business, we're starting to see hiring revive at this point. And it's not just the usual suspects, if I could call them that, IT skills, IT services, e-commerce, logistics, that we've been talking about for a few months. We're starting to observe that by and large, across industries, market leaders are starting to plan for growth. Maybe physical retail in some places has been a bit behind. But apart from that, if you look at our general staffing business, if you look at our IT staffing business, by and large, even our BPO business is starting to see demand come back since September, gradually, but steadily. So I think that's sort of the state of play today. We're also very encouraged by the new labor law reforms because we think that will drive a further evolution from informal work to formal work. I think maybe three things to point out. I think one is fewer and more flexible laws that alter the cost-benefit considerations for an employer who's today not compliant. We think more employers will choose to hire labor formally rather than being non-compliant, and that will bring people into the social security net. Greater flexibility in recruiting models have been introduced in the current labor laws, including fixed-term employment, and they've made it much more easy for contractors to function nationwide, which will also allow us to bring more flexibility, allowing more people to hire without worries. And the third thing is, I think a first globally, we're actually establishing platform-based work as a legal concept. And that will tend to bring, again, far more flexibility into the formal workforce and allow more people to be hired. So we're certainly seeing that you combine with the Atmanirbhar Bharat 3.0 by the government, we're starting to see the momentum build for sure in the industry.
I think it's important to give perspective to those who are watching that how wide the data source is for this, Suraj. And let me just take a second to do that, because I had the chance to speak with you earlier as well. We're talking about a database of 700,000 pay slips a month. We're talking about a database coming on the basis of Monster India and one of the largest staffing teams staffing companies in the country. Based on this, what would you say is the quantum of improvement for October compared to September 2020? Is there a year-on-year comparison you can give me? And can you give me any kind of comparison from March 2020?
Sure. So look, I think you're absolutely right. We're the largest employer in the country, the largest staffing company, IT staffing company, one of the largest facilities management companies, the second largest BPO provider globally. In India. So I think we've got a fairly broad perspective. Obviously, you made the point at the beginning, nobody has complete data, but we try to piece it all together. See, I think, if you look at the number of jobs in the formal economy, and we tend to track this through our payroll data, through our subsidiary Allsec, which is the largest payslips provider in the country. In large, we have about 125 plus large enterprise customers whose payslips we process. If you take October versus March, the total number of payslips processed was actually down about 5%, which maybe is a proxy for, let's say, the stock of jobs in the market. Right? So approximately 5% down. The good thing is October started to see a minuscule increase. Minuscule, but an increase nonetheless. And where you see a lot of significant positive movement month on month is in construction, which was up about 8%, retail up about 2%, healthcare is also up about 2%, professional services up about 5%. So it's in some of these industries where you're starting to see momentum grow, right? And that's in the stock of jobs. We also look at Monster, and Monster publishes the employment index every month, which is a composite score of hiring in the economy. And again, there, I think if you go year on year, or at least if you take, let's say, to March, which is pre-COVID, we are down, let's say, about 13% in hiring activity across the country. What we do see is, if you look at October versus the lows in May, we're up about 3% or so in October. Again, very sectoral, in that what we see in October is that retail, shipping, BPO, IT, logistics are starting to increase significant growth in job postings. These are largely service-driven industries, and obviously a little bit more geographically spread than maybe pre-COVID. So while tier one cities like Delhi, Chennai, Bangalore, Mumbai are taking longer to recover, or Pune is taking longer to recover, we're seeing jobs bounce back much faster in, let's say, a Chandigarh and Ahmedabad or a Jaipur. So let's say the next tier of cities.
So that's an interesting perspective. Jobs are bouncing back in tier 2 cities. Can you share anything on the work from home phenomenon? Are more companies inclined to hire from locations other than where their offices are because of the ease of work from home, or is that still a passing phase? And secondly, if you can give us some insight to the level of hiring activity. Is it more entry level, mid level, senior level? Where is the hiring happening?
No, sure. Look, I think I think COVID is a little bit like any recession in the world, which is, what recessions do is they force businesses to think differently about employment. And typically in a recession, people move towards more virtual modes, more temporary modes. And what we find is a lot of that change tends to stick. So we do think that automation, work from home, as trends are here to stay. Now, there's a question of to what extent will they stay? But we certainly see that there's a few interesting things we see. For example, in our call center and BPO business, many companies in India historically would not consider outsourcing their shared services, be it finance activities or HR transaction processing activities, because there was always a feeling of we need to have our people close to us, be able to kind of oversee them day to day to get work done. One of the trends we're seeing in COVID is that people are saying, well, I'm anyway managing my employees virtually. So why don't I actually outsource them to a third party who can automate and digitize faster and get me more rapid cost savings? So there's certainly a shift towards virtualization, greater comfort with virtualization. And we do think that, as you see, for example, even in the call center industry, there's still a fair percentage of our executives, call center executives, who are working from home. And so there is an opportunity to hire more in tier two cities where maybe salaries are a bit lower, and drive that virtualization. So we certainly will see that trend. I also think that some of this is linked to the fact that, if you look both globally and in India, the pace of economic recovery, in a sense, is inversely proportional to the depth and breadth of the lockdown. And what you see in India is that, if the cities I named, Delhi, Chennai, Mumbai, Pune, are cities which had relatively long lockdowns because of relatively kind of large outbreaks of COVID. And that's where recovery is slower. Whereas a lot of the tier two cities, I think, have been able to stem the COVID and therefore get back to work faster. If you look at across the Quest system also, I mean, every day I get a report to say what percent of employees are coming to the office by city. And what we see is in some of our tier two cities like a Bhopal, we'll have 80% of people in the office. And yet, if you look at a Bangalore or a Bombay, it's still 25-30%. So I think that behavior will change. It will just take us time as people get out of their COVID-induced paralysis. So that's the answer, I think, to your question on cities, Tamanna. To your question on levels, interestingly, we're finding that the maximum sort of hiring decline is at the top and at freshers. At the top, I guess, because people are not planning for significant expansions of management capacity right now, by and large. So there we've seen a 31% decline versus March 20. And freshers have declined a little bit more than average also. I think it's because in this time, again, a lot of people are not planning for very rapid growth yet. Puts the onus on freshers to maybe go that much further to distinguish themselves, differentiate themselves in the market, learning new skills. We're certainly seeing, for example, in the IT industry, the demand for digital talent, analytical talent, automation talent is really high. And I think people who skill themselves, they will improve their prospects. From a functional perspective, maybe as you would expect, in an economy that's gone through a significant amount of belt tightening, areas like HR, finance, or the back office support functions have seen hiring volumes fall also. And that could also stay for a little bit until, by and large, people maybe 2 quarters into growth, when people start bulking up on their back office also. I think the automation drives are starting to show up in those functional areas.
So if I were to sum it up, things are improving, but in a minuscule fashion. We're still down about 5% in formal jobs compared to March. So there is a lot of hurt out there, some time to go. Things are just about beginning to look up from October. Would that be the right way to sum it up?
That's right. I think that we'll start seeing the growth first more in temporary employment, because I think that's where people are coming out, and that's where we're seeing the numbers in our own business. So temporary employment will certainly bounce back faster. But I think that's right. I think that the shoots in some of these industries are far from small, Tamar. Like construction was up 8% or a 5% increase in professional services. Those are not small increases month on month. So I think the message here is you've got to position yourself to where the water is flowing and where the fish are swimming, and that's how you catch the fish.
I think that's a good saying and a good note to end on. Thank you so much, Suraj, for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, we'll go into a very short break. The India Revival Mission up next.